This is the third and final part of my mini-series on the psychology of learning, which is part of my bigger series, Introduction to Psychology. In the first two parts of this series, I discussed learning in general, how different psychological schools of thought approach the phenomenon, and what sorts of things influence learning, what the process is like, and how it can be assessed. Now I will focus on studying, or learning intentionally. I will discuss things like the influence of culture and social factors on studying, how motivation can influence studying, and different kinds of mindsets and strategies of studying. I will then explain why you should avoid trying to multitask and why the idea of learning styles is a myth. I will finally give a lot of advice for studying. My name is Jouni Vilkka and this is my channel, TFF Teacher from Finland. Don't forget to subscribe and click the thumbs up button. Many factors influence how you study and how much you learn. Some of them are external, such as the environment you study in. If you don't have a safe place where you can study without interruptions, that is obviously already a difficulty. Libraries typically try to provide a place that is more or less quiet and perhaps motivating in other ways. Being surrounded by books may be inspiring, at least for some of us. Rooms with nothing but the chairs and tables, without sources of distraction like TV and things like that, can help you focus. You might want to switch the mode of your phone so that you won't get notifications, or even turn it off. If you have to use a computer, as is likely these days, you may be tempted by games and the internet or social media. If you find them too tempting, log off from all social media on your computer and maybe even uninstall any games you may have. Perhaps there are ways to use a different account for studying on your computer. If you know more tips about this specifically, please let me know in the comments below. Your culture may affect your studying in at least two ways. First, the people in your life will have some kind of attitude towards what you do, and that may affect you. If they don't value studying and education, it may be difficult for you to openly display different values. I would recommend finding people in your life who do value intellectual pursuits, or at least actually care about you, so that they don't proverbially piss on your values and dreams, and try to harm your motivation to study. People who don't want you to study are probably stupid and ignorant and feel inferior to anyone who actually wants to learn and seems capable of doing so. That's why they don't want you to learn. If they are people you have to rely on, it may be easier to study in secret from them, but as soon as possible, get better people in your life. It is more problematic if you have internalized anti-intellectual values and ways of thinking from your culture. If you find a school subject difficult because it seems pointless to you, then perhaps you should try to find out why it is taught at school. If you are in college and have to take a mandatory course on a subject you don't care for, you should realize that the course is probably mandatory for a reason. It is unfortunate if such reasons have not been made clear from the start, but you can probably ask the teacher or others what they are. At the very least, studying broadens your scope of understanding, so if for nothing else, study for your general improvement. You may later come across better reasons for it. If you just want to learn something that you can easily turn into a source of income, your motivation to study it will be weak in any case. You may have little influence on the teaching methods and materials used unless you are the teacher, but if the materials and methods are not to your liking, you can look for additional materials for yourself. For example, there are educational videos and documentaries about related subjects. There are books, online articles, perhaps even activist organizations with their websites and social media accounts that might provide relevant information depending on what the subject is. If you have to look for these things yourself, you need to be especially careful and vigilant in your critical thinking and source criticism. I offer advice about such things in my series Introduction to Philosophy and Critical Thinking. If you study in a classroom with others, the general atmosphere matters a lot, and you can do your part to make learning easy and fun by improving the general mood of your classroom. If everyone tries to be upbeat and eager to learn, it will make it easier for everyone to do the same. That shows in results as well. Participate and encourage others. At the very least, don't cause a negative impact and don't disturb others. Motivation is very important for learning. Complete lack of motivation, amotivation, makes learning practically impossible. Usually, in my experience anyway, the problem is not that a student somehow inherently lacks motivation to learn. Sometimes their life just makes it impossible. Once those external things are taken care of, motivation to study is likely to improve. There is of course always variation in the level of motivation to learn something. Nearly all teachers understand that not everyone will be extremely interested in precisely what they teach. That is a major difference between university level and anything below it. People in higher education are usually studying what they are interested in, even passionate about. But even there, sometimes the circumstances of life, such as death in the family, are such that a student will have to focus on other things. Another problem, one that I have struggled with ever since becoming a university student at the turn of the millennium, is having too many interests. This lack of focus mainly leads to problems with time management. It would be good to be able to focus on things in the correct order so that you achieve the important goals. It might be better to get good at one thing first. You can then add other interests and hobbies to your life. Studying several different fields at the same time was not the wisest decision for me, I can say in retrospect. Unfortunately, a common type of motivation at school is merely trying to survive, to pass the required courses. Survival motivation leads to using only minimal effort with what is called a surface-oriented learning strategy. External motivation has a similar effect. It can be caused by the promise of a cash reward or something equivalent for passing courses or getting good grades or a degree. While such things can motivate one in the short term, they do not motivate one to actually learn and in fact can lead to becoming disinterested in the subject matter itself. Once the reward has been gained, the things learned tend to get forgotten easily. Also, external rewards make cheating tempting. Internal motivation, genuine interest in the subject itself, is the best type of motivation because it will last and the learned information will be retained more effectively. Such motivation leads to what is called deep learning strategy, where the learner tries to make sense of the subject to truly understand it at a deep level and integrate the new knowledge with the pre-existing knowledge base. Related to motivation is your attribution style, what you tend to attribute your successes and failures to. I discussed this earlier in the context of social psychology. Internal attribution means you think it's you You failed because you are just innately bad at the thing. External attribution of failure means blaming it on others or the circumstances. Temporary attribution is only applied for this instance, thinking that it might be different another time. A permanent negative attribution of your failure to yourself is obviously pretty bad, and I hope you realize that it is also almost certainly incorrect. You can actually learn and do better. That's because things about learning are controllable. You may have a tendency to think that things of that nature are uncontrollable, but it certainly would be better for you to not think like that. Attribution styles affect your self-esteem. It is better to have a growth mindset than a fixed mindset, as Carol Dweck has labeled these ways of thinking. This especially has to do with how people view their intellectual abilities. A lot of people mistakenly think that intelligence is some kind of permanently fixed quantity. This leads people to think that if they don't understand something immediately, they'll never get it. This kind of thinking is at least partially caused by the way people praise a child's intelligence when they succeed at something. It would be better to praise their tenacity, because that would teach them that it's about putting in the effort, and they would learn that you can actually grow as a person, including improving your knowledge and your abilities. There are different orientations to learning that also significantly impact the way you study and how well you are likely to learn. The worst would be unoriented, which means not even trying to learn. Self-defending orientation is about avoiding difficult tasks and exams that one might fail at, because then one would have to accept the failure and what that might imply. By avoiding potential failures, you are able to keep thinking you are good at the thing without risking your ego. Dependency-oriented learners seek the approval of their teacher or others. They are not fundamentally studying for the sake of the subject itself, but just the praise they get or hope to get when they do well. This is a bit unhealthy and certainly unhelpful for their future. They could do better by adopting mission orientation, being interested in the subject itself for its own sake. That is where the strongest motivation comes from. A true amateur will keep loving the subject matter, and they will be constantly rewarded by any additional thing they learn about it, so the motivation will last. Studying requires skills. It is not merely an innate fixed ability. For some of us, it may be something we are so used to that it is difficult to realize that it is a skill set. But it is, and you can improve your ability to study. This skill set includes at least the following. 1. The active and determined effort to incorporate new knowledge or skills with the old. 2. Coming up with new questions. 3. Knowing ways of studying best suited to oneself. 4. The ability to assess one's own progress in learning. 5. The ability to try different methods, cooperate with others, and typically a playful attitude toward learning new things. And 6. Ability to autonomously motivate oneself, finding internal motivation for studying or practicing, and flexibility in dealing with difficulties. Studying skills also involve the ability to choose the right learning strategy for the task at hand. This distinction was made by Ferenc Marton and Roger Sellier. A surface-oriented strategy, or surface processing, is one that seeks merely to retain enough information to pass a test or otherwise learn something for a short period of time. This can be achieved by memorizing short summaries, definitions of terms, word lists, and so on. One can pick specific points that are details of the general subject being studied in the hopes that there will be a question about that thing specifically in the test, for example. Typically, if you study for a test like this, you can pass the test, but will not remember much about what you studied after the test. This strategy can be quite enough as part of learning a language. You can learn a list of words about a given subject and retain those words long enough to be able to use them somewhere and thus integrate them into your vocabulary of that language more permanently. A deep-oriented strategy, or deep processing, is something for more complicated subjects, and in general when you want to learn something more permanently, or if you genuinely want to understand the subject matter. This strategy could involve trying to form a general overview of the subject and how it is connected to other things. That will help recall the information later with the help of the many connections. Deep-oriented strategy could also include dividing the whole into connected segments so that you can focus into each of them in turn. Expressing the learned content in your own words, probably in writing, but in some cases even by drawing or by other means, would be a very useful application of this strategy. That would also involve a critical evaluation of what has been learned, which is an important part of the deep-oriented strategy. One thing you should avoid when studying is multitasking. It is to be avoided in general because it is mostly harmful. What it means is trying to do several tasks at the same time, such as cooking dinner, watching TV, and studying a textbook for an exam. The problem is that our brains cannot actually focus on several things at the same time, and what happens instead is that you will be shifting your focus from one thing to the next all the time. This will not give you enough time on anything demanding, and you are likely to fail at one or even all of those tasks. Burning your dinner, missing what happened on the TV show, and forgetting anything you may have read in the book. Of course, it is possible to get things done even by multitasking, but it seems that usually they would get more efficiently done by doing them consecutively, one thing at a time. Tasks like solving math problems typically require sustained attention, without which it may be impossible to solve them. Multitasking frequently may even lower your IQ. Multitasking is stressful for the brain and weakens short-term memory. In some experiments, it has been found that people who rarely try multitasking are actually better at doing more than one task at the same time than frequent multitaskers. In short, avoid multitasking. Focus on one thing at a time, although not for indefinitely long periods. You need to take breaks, and that's when you can watch the show or prepare dinner. Just don't keep switching from one task to the next too rapidly. You may be able to improve your ability to focus with mindfulness exercises. They can also help you reduce stress, even that caused by multitasking. While some study methods may be more suitable for you than others, it is mostly due to finding a method you find motivating, inspiring, rewarding, or perhaps just the least boring. There is a tenacious myth about learning styles I fear even mentioning, because there is a risk that you will remember the point incorrectly. The myth is that individuals can be, for example, kinesthetic, auditive, or visual learners, meaning that they learn best using this learning style by listening to a teacher, reading, or whatever. The point is that this is a myth. It is not true. Learning is about understanding, which requires cognitive, usually verbal, processing, and the sense through which the information reaches the mind of the learner does not matter as such. Information presented visually, in writing and perhaps images, is probably the most efficient way to communicate, and so most people probably will benefit most by using visual study materials. It can be tiring to read a lot, and listening to someone read for you instead can be a welcome break, but it is not better for transmitting information into your brain for processing. So, if someone tries to sell you something by appealing to allegedly existing different learning styles, I hope you'll at least remember that it is just a myth. Such things don't exist any more than ghosts or magical energies. Among the best pieces of advice for learning academic subject matter that I can give you is to make good notes or even write an article about what you are trying to learn. The reason for this is that when you write, you are forced into thinking well. You can merely read a book without understanding any of the contents, perhaps without even realizing you didn't understand it. But when you write down the main contents in your own words, using your own examples and ways of explaining it, you really have to understand the content. A similarly useful way is teaching the content to others. But I assume you are more likely to be able to write than you are to have others to teach to. If you can teach others, that does provide the additional benefit that they may ask questions you might not think of on your own. The better you are at explaining something, the better you have learned it yourself. You are also likely to retain for a long time the information you have taught or written, even if you lose your notes. Others may not benefit that much from your notes, depending somewhat on your method of taking notes. For example, a mind map with just words and arrows might not make sense for others, but it may be enough to remind you what you were thinking about. This is partially why it is more beneficial to write using pencil and paper rather than a computer. The unique paper with all the unintended marks on it is familiar to you. Also, writing with a pencil is slower than typing, allowing your brain to create a more lasting memory imprint of the event. That is why I advise students at school to use pencil and paper rather than the laptop for making notes. Notes like mind maps or even just lists of words are also useful when reviewing what you have learned and to structure all the information. They help remind you about the content much more broadly than the information actually put down in them. They are also very much recommended practice to use in exams before starting to write the actual essay required. I will now provide some bits of advice for studying that you can apply on your own or when studying in a group. They are not intended to all be followed slavishly, but rather as examples of things you can do to improve your study results. At least try some of them first, and perhaps some others the next time. Plan a schedule first. You may have a timetable to adapt to, so you need to be aware of the deadlines and all the requirements that need to be met. List them. Choose your own deadlines before the actual ones and estimate the amount of time available for studying for each deadline. Now you can calculate what portion of the whole you have to study per time unit available. For example, how much you have to read every day to be able to finish the textbook in 12 days, so you will still have time to revise before the exam. Divide the content to be learned into segments. If the topic is difficult or complicated, you may need to break it down into very small bits. Keep track of your progress, for example by using a checklist. This will help with motivation by making even abstract subjects more concrete and allowing you to see progress. When you begin reading something, start by forming some kind of an overview by skimming the text first. Read the headlines, glance at the images, and if study questions for chapters are provided, read them before reading the chapter. Once you have read the text properly, making notes as needed, stop before moving to the next chapter to think about what you learned in this chapter. You may now answer the study questions as well, at least mentally. Once you have read the whole text, go over the notes you made, possibly also making a mind map or similar overview of the subject. Any method of making notes is better than none. You can write in long form, a study diary, or just lists of words. You can write abstracts or a book report. Mind maps, drawings, anything that can organize the information in your mind is useful. When reviewing the content, at least go over all of your notes, perhaps in the margins of the book if it's your own, and the most important concepts. Try to come up with questions of your own about the subject. Do not try to study when you are tired. Sleep well, take naps as needed. Eat healthy food and drink enough water. If, like me, you sometimes find it difficult to stay awake while reading, sipping water may help with that. Don't try to focus for prolonged periods at a time. For example, just reading for 15 minutes at a time may be enough. Take breaks where you stand up and walk a bit, look into the distance and do something unrelated to what you are studying, such as cleaning up a bit. All this is to maintain your health in general, not just your ability to focus. Teaching is one of the best ways to learn, so take any opportunity to teach others, learning with them, benefiting from their questions and viewpoints. Before starting on a new thing, try to recall what you think you know about the subject. You may then more easily realize it when the new information conflicts with your previous understanding. This does not necessarily mean your previous understanding was incorrect, but that you need to look into the cause of the disagreement. You can also start learning about the new topic by looking into a general dictionary, like the English Wikipedia, before delving deeper into the text you are supposed to study. Your emphasis should be on thinking about the subject from different points of view, not merely to repeat what you have read. Instead of reading the same text several times, it is more useful to read more texts about the same subject. This way the actual information, instead of the wording, will be more strongly encoded within your brain. Learning some memory techniques, called mnemonics, may be useful in some cases. Take a break between reading and writing notes to allow your brain to process the information subconsciously before the conscious effort. If there are any tips you would like to add, let me know in the comments below. As with all things, studying and learning can be practiced. Skills and even intelligence can be improved. These 3 videos on learning and studying contain lots of information, and it is unlikely that you can retain all of it right away. If you want to improve your learning, I suggest you try the things I mentioned here that you have not been using so far. The next 2 videos are going to be about something a bit different, going well outside the normal scope of an introduction to psychology. But they are interesting subjects that have been studied by psychologists, among others. I will discuss things like conspiracy theories. But this is all for now. Bye! If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.